reminded him of that publicly. I called the White House, he wouldn't even take my call. But I thought it was important that he do so because I don't want to see his legacy tarnished. I don't want to see Donald Trump win. Then I called other candidates, names you know better than mine, to encourage them to enter the primary. That's what you do in democracy, you participate. That's why we have primary elections. So the Democrats in this case can choose the candidate best positioned to win. And this year it really matters. We're just months away from the 2024 election. They wouldn't do it. You know why? They're all waiting until 2028. And my we have too many not our common interest. It got to a point where Democratic leadership, because my perspective was so incongruent, I know they feel the same way. And then 2 weeks before the filing deadline here in New Hampshire, I decided I would do this. If not me, who? If not now, when? And in the course of 2 weeks, we put together a presidential campaign, declared my candidacy in Concord here on October 27th, and I've only been doing this for 10 weeks. Went from 0 name recognition and 0 in the polls to climbing every week, and now we're at 28% as of today. 28%. You know, it's really interesting. There's a GOP race that is completely meaningless because Donald Trump is crushing them and will crush them, and all the coverage is the GOP race. And here we are in the Granite State with me at 28%. The president is almost certain to face a historically low performance number in New Hampshire, which will demonstrate that voters feel the same as the polls are reflecting. Bill Clinton and Barack Obama, the last 2 Democrats to run in this race as incumbents, got 84 and 81% of the vote respectively. It's not going to happen this time because this president, a good man, is not re-electable. And that's going to be proven over the coming weeks and months. So my contention to all of you is, A, we can do better. B, it's time to. And C, every single poll in the country right now is showing Joe Biden losing to Donald Trump, and even worse to Nikki Haley, who is literally right down the street. And I've tried for the last few hours to try to meet, but so far unsuccessfully. Because I think it's important. Thank you. I'm so grateful to you because I think we should be getting to know each other, not running from each other. How are we going to solve problems if we avoid sitting down with one another, right? That's my contention. Joe Biden, a good man, losing to Donald Trump, almost every national poll, every battleground state. His approval numbers are historically low, it's hard to recover from, and we know what's going to happen. And with Nikki Haley, it's even worse. So my contention is, why would Democrats walk into this delusion that's just going to be a nightmare? And here's the other sad truth. In the state of Florida, the Democratic Party has left every candidate off the ballot other than Joe Biden, saying that he already won the primary, we don't need to have one, no need to have 4 million voters actually do an election, so we'll just give him the delegates. Literally canceled an election, the Democratic Party. North Carolina did exactly the same thing, completely violating their bylaws. The state of New Hampshire tried, but the Secretary of State had to intervene. And you know what they've done to New Hampshire. 103 years that you have practiced this important act of democracy by vetting candidates in a state that actually gives a chance to the underdog. Because we can drive up and down and back and forth, and we can afford, better than most other states, to actually introduce ourselves, right? And you take it seriously. You come through this, literally, there's this old adage, candidates come and they walk through the snow and meet the voters of New Hampshire. Well, I'll tell you, that's exactly what I just did, and you can demonstrate it with the snow that was on my jacket. That's a beautiful tradition. But what did the Democratic National Committee do, and why? They'll tell you one thing, but the truth is they did it because Joe Biden lost here badly in 2020. Didn't want to be embarrassed. So they snagged that from you and then told you your vote doesn't matter, your primary isn't legitimate, so therefore it's meaningless. And they had the audacity to send a letter. And you saw what they responded with, thank goodness. Those letters should be enshrined in the National Archives for Americans to see the danger of what George Washington warned us against, which was factions, doing the business for themselves and not for the country. And that's where we find ourselves. I'm just telling you the truth. I'm saying the quiet part out loud. I'm the only one of the Democrats, 250 of us in Congress, the only one who's saying what we all know. It's probably because I'm not running for re-election in Congress, but most of my colleagues are, and they're too darn afraid to tell you the truth. So, my proposition is this. It's time for change. It's time to be a country in which 60% of Americans don't have to live paycheck to paycheck, where 40% have more than $400 in their bank accounts. where everybody has health insurance, where everybody has a home in which to live, where every student who aspires to be educated doesn't have to carry tens of thousands of dollars of debt at higher interest rates than car loans. Are we out of our minds? The wealthiest, most successful country in human history, one that spends almost $1 trillion a year on national defense, when 60% of our neighbors can't even afford their lives? It's nonsensical, and I'm sick of it. It's not just about beating Donald Trump, it's about completely turning the page from the past. With crises all around the world, war in Ukraine, chaos at our southern border, of course the horror in Gaza and Israel, we need new leadership from the West Bank to the West Wing. And once we have it, my goodness, your generation, we're gonna rise, work together, be excited again, and joyful and proud again. That's what I'm here to do this for. So I wanna thank you. Keep the faith, keep inspired. Go vote on January 23rd. If you don't vote for me, please vote. Because I want this country to see how you do it and why you earned it and why it is so darn important to practice democracy, not suppress it. And that's what I'm here for. So with that, I love you all. I'm grateful, especially to you young people. Please, at that point in your life, when you face the moment that I did in 2016, stand up and participate. Serve your city, serve your state, serve your country in some way, shape, or form. And if we do, mark my words, it's going to be a joyful future. And I'll close with this to the young people. Right now, we have a program called Social Security, which you all know if you work in America, you pay a little bit into this fund, and they give you money at the end of your retirement so you can live a nice life of dignity for the rest of your life. It's the most successful anti-poverty program in the world. But I want to complement that with something entirely new. It's called American Dream Accounts, in which the federal government would put $1,000 into an account for every single baby born in the country. And then every year, $500 could be added to it. By the way, it's only $3.5 billion a year to fund these accounts. They're invested in the American stock market. Every one of you would have an app on your phone. We would start introducing financial education into our schools. You would learn how to be investors and entrepreneurs. You would track the growth of your portfolio. And by the time you're 18 years old, if you graduate high school, you get $20,000 to start your lives and be an owner in this economy. And if you actually help your country by serving in AmeriCorps or Peace Corps for a year, we'll put another $10,000 in. So you'll have $30,000 at the age of 18 or 19, 20 years old to start your lives. Put a down payment on a house, afford your rent, maybe start a small business. That's the kind of country I want to see us become. It doesn't cost that much, and it starts reducing disparities that have existed in this country for far too long in far too many communities. That's how I think we should work together. I think it's a great way to change the dynamics of today, give everybody a chance, raise the foundation, and have a little bit of fun on the way. So with that, love to turn it over to you, have some Q&A, anything that's on your minds. We will start with you.
There's been a material change in, I think, in the culture of this country. My parents, very successful business people, ran Bears Hotel right down the street.
Oh, I just came from there.
There you go.
1843.
Yes. And every president and every presidential candidate visited. So I met them all at my parents' hotel.
I love it.
My parents were they were successful business people, but they also were very active in this community. There were 2 benches across the street in recognition of my mother. My dad's name was all over town, the things he did. That's not the case anymore. Business people don't contribute to their communities as they did when I was growing up. That's a culture issue. How would you address that?
Yeah, you know, you're right. I'll tell you, I was raised in a family that taught me 2 lessons about business. One of which was business is a means to an end. The end is not to aggregate, to collect as much money as humanly possible, but rather to share as much as possible with the people in the communities that make it so. The other thing is my great-grandfather, J. Phillips, would tell me all the time, he said, Dean, money is like manure. If you stack it up, it stinks. And if you spread it out, it fertilizes. And if you think about that, it makes perfect sense in business, in philanthropy, in Congress, in our country. We have enough to go around. It's not about everybody having the same amount. That's communism. We can be a compassionate, capitalist country and ensure that people start from a higher level, a higher foundation, if you will. And part of that comes with, I think, this return to community. You know, when everyone's spending all their times on their phones and their screens, becoming afraid of what they see, The best way to solve that is just to get out and be with people again. That's what this is. That's why Littleton is such a cool place. That's why New Hampshire is so unique, I think. Unlike the huge cities in this country where people are completely chaotic and completely glued to their phones, you know, this is a cultural shift that has to occur. And I hope your generation does this better than ours is right now. But it's not lost, and I'll just close with this. Angertainment, I'll say it again, angertainment would have us believe we're far more divided and apathetic than we really are. I'm seeing anything but massive division here as I'm in the streets. That's with Trumpers too. I'm seeing anything but apathy amongst granite skaters, you know, coming to my events in bigger numbers and going to house parties and cafes and coffee shops. So I don't think all is lost. But I do think we need leadership that re-inspires and reignites that possibility again. And I don't think Donald Trump or Joe Biden are even remotely positioned to bring excitement and joy and possibility back to this country. And that's why I'm running for president. So I will mark my words, everything you just shared, a return to the goodness and to the possibilities and to those core values that I think have been lost by leadership in the United States. Yes, sir.
Congressman, again, because I'm the town manager, ICMA says I'm not to endorse in terms of that, but just a little history. My first vote was in 1976. At 18 years old, I worked knocking on doors for Jimmy Carter. 4 years later, I wasn't happy with the job that Jimmy Carter did, and I worked for the candidate in the Democratic Party, Ted Kennedy, who opposed that. As an 18-year-old, I joined the Orange County Democratic Committee. I'm from Orange County, Florida, so I'm still a registered voter in Florida, so I know what you're talking about. I have no vote this year. But what I want to say is I saw the doors close on a young man who wanted to be involved in the party because I didn't go with an incumbent then. What is the one thing that we can do today that someone who is willing to challenge an incumbent president of any party, what can we do? What can this room do to not have 1980 happen again?
Great question, and it's actually remarkably simple. Every one of you have the power to influence this election. Because January 23rd is when the eyes of not just the country, but the world will be on you. By voting in the primary to begin with, that is a blessing to democracy. And I love that. Voting for me is even a greater blessing to democracy, because I'm afraid if Joe Biden is the nominee, he is a person that just will not be able to beat either of the GOP candidates. Now, if Nikki Haley is the nominee, I'm not as afraid about democracy, I'll be honest. But I don't see a chance for her. I mean, Trump has an iron grip on this party. Haley did not do that well in Iowa yesterday. Trump crushed it. It's going to be maybe neck and neck here, and that's a good thing, I'd say. But what you can do is consider doing what people tell you you shouldn't do, which is get out of line, raise your hand, and raise your voice. That's what I did. And if you still believe that in America we can do that, and sometimes we must do that, the way you did it in 1980, please do. Don't have the Democratic Party or the Republican Party tell you what's possible and what's not. Do not let them deny you your vote or your voice. If you have social media, please use it. If you've got a telephone, if you've got a pen and paper at home and a postcard that you can write postcards for us, you can make some phone calls, come out with me and campaign, knock on some doors. You want to have the most extraordinary experience of your lives and actually affect the future of not just the state and the country, but the world? Join me. And it's not out of desperation or fear, it's out of joy and possibility. Being the underdog is really fun. Every week we have, that's how we've gotten to this point so far, and it's just beginning. What happens on January 23rd? I'm going to keep going, because this is not a sprint, it's a marathon. And frankly, it's a marathon I do not believe the President of the United States is going to be able to fulfill and finish. I don't see it happening. And if he could, he would be debating right now. He would be answering questions of the press. He would be showing up in front of voters. He would be doing town halls. He'd be answering questions. But think about it, when's the last time you really saw that from him? Donald Trump is going to, I think, obliterate Democrats up and down the ballot, and we're in big trouble, and you all can actually prevent that by helping me win on January 23rd. Winning may look different than getting more votes than Joe Biden, but winning means that we put on the radar screen and shows momentum, and then we go to Michigan, South Carolina, Super Tuesday, and shock this country. All of you from the palm of your hands can help me win. And I would ask that you go to dean24.com, talk to my amazing team that's here today, and join our family. And not that, just that, we're gonna have fun, and we're gonna celebrate in November and then January 20th of 2025, when I'm inaugurated as President of the United States. And then you're gonna come have dinner in the White House. And then we're gonna watch the Vikings. You know what? It is much more likely that I'm inaugurated on January 20th, winning the Super Bowl. That I can almost guarantee you. I know, it's like a knife. Yes, sir, in the back.
So I have a question about chaos. So you come to a town that our select board meeting ended in utter chaos. And it seems to reflect what's happening in our world and what's happening politically. And Donald Trump effectively uses inciting chaos. And we've seen that. So my question to you is, how do you govern in a time of chaos and when people are using chaos for political ends?
Yeah, you know, I'm so glad you bring this up. Former President Trump is like the arsonist who then makes the case to the country that he's a firefighter. You know, he stirs it up, he creates chaos, he injects fear, he inspires people to become rioters and a mob. I call it an insurrection because I was there that day. And then he says, I'm going to be the one that mitigates all this and keeps things calm. I mean, come on, you've seen the evidence. Now, conversely, I'll tell you what really saddened me today. You know, last night, 2 GOP members actually dropped out of the race. Governor Hutchinson and Mr. Ramaswamy, right? Now, the Democratic National Committee, the party I represent, I thought should have issued a thoughtful statement celebrating, not celebrating people, but as I did last night with Ramaswamy, celebrating participation, right? This notion that in democracy, we should celebrate those who would ensure that we have competition. So we should celebrate the competitors, even if we disagree with them, because they are creating the democratic dynamic that we live by. But the Democratic National Committee did this snarky, ridiculous press release that basically said, oh, we didn't even know Governor Hutchinson was still in the race, right? Now, is that chaos in the way you're talking about? No, but it's disrespectful, it's mean-spirited, it's unnecessary, and it's obnoxious. And I'm embarrassed for my party. I'm embarrassed for my party for suppressing voters, for keeping candidates off ballots, for not inspiring debate. But when you think about Donald Trump, what he's tapping into is anger. People are really angry. And you ask about the solution. It's actually remarkably simple. Human relationships, when people feel heard, when you show up, ask people what they're troubled by, what they need, what they're frustrated by, what are their dreams. They feel heard and they act in rational ways. When people don't feel heard, they start yelling at each other. Doesn't matter if it's a relationship at home, a friendship, or at a town meeting. If people don't feel heard, they act ridiculously. And that's part of what we're facing right now, is people are not feeling heard. I'm afraid Democrats are not listening to broad swaths of this country. You look at a map of county votes in this country, do you know how few are blue? It's staggering. We're not even trying. I will. So I think that's the answer, is listening. I have great animus towards Donald Trump. I have no animus towards Trump supporters. I've talked to a lot of wonderful people who are frustrated and feel unheard and unappreciated, and I'm going to invite them to join us. And that's how we reduce chaos. We also need to reduce chaos at our border through policy. I can get into that too. It's nonsensical that the Democratic Party and our president is ignoring an issue that is of extraordinary importance. And I know you in New Hampshire, even we in Minnesota, we have northern borders that at some point are going to be big deals, because we are going to face a migration crisis that will make what we have right now look like nothing. As people around the world cannot find clean water, as war expands and famine and climate change, we have to be prepared. We have to be, I would argue we need to be a country, as we talk about chaos, we should reduce the barriers to entry to people who choose to become legal immigrants, and raise the barriers to entry to those who wish to do so illegally. And that means changing our asylum policy if we want to reduce chaos. Why would we force people to come across our border to declare asylum? Why wouldn't we ask them to do so in their country of origin, where we can adjudicate their cases locally, where they don't have to spend $10,000 of their hard-earned life savings by giving it to, if we adjudicated cases locally and they are approved, we would bring them to the United States legally, and they'd have $10,000 of their own money in their pocket to start their lives in this country. It is not that hard to do to reduce chaos. And then around the world, we underinvest in diplomacy. We under-anticipate world problems. We missed the boat with Ukraine and Russia. We could have prevented that. And in the Middle East, it is the same cycle of horrific bloodshed and violence for 75 years. You know why? It's the same people using the same tactics, doing the same thing, hoping something will change. We are long overdue for the creation of a Palestinian state that is safe and secure and a land of opportunity that lives side by side with Israel, that deserves to be safe and secure and prosperous as well. And I am a Jewish man. I intend to be a Jewish president who signs the documents that recognize Palestine to reduce chaos and give people hope. That's what we need to do. Human relationships. And the background, then I'll come back to you.
So I'm a big fan of your progressive platform. I'm wondering, as a congressman, how do you see the climate in Congress, if you were to become, when you do become president, the climate, like the bipartisan climate to get those policies passed? Because you're going to need their help.
Well, I intend to inspire good climate change in the Congress. We need to change the climate in Congress. And how do I do that? By doing what I'm doing right now. That's why I'm the second most bipartisan member of the entire House, Senate, and all 50 governors. Out of 585 people, the Common Ground Committee calls me the second most bipartisan. And I'm a progressive. I sign on to Republican bills that I believe are good ones. They sign on to mine. I work with my colleagues. Believe it or not, the first big bill I had passed was signed into law by President Trump during COVID. It was the Paycheck Protection Program Flexibility Act. I'm the second most bipartisan member of Congress. You know who I did that bill with? My Republican colleague? A guy named Chip Roy, who's about the 430th most bipartisan member of Congress. But we're friends. We don't agree all the time. In fact, often we don't. But he's a man of principle. He's consistent. When our principles intersected, in this case it did, as helping small businesses, we got together. We needed to do it together. He couldn't have got that to Trump to get signed if he didn't work with me to get it through Nancy Pelosi's House. That's how working together makes a difference. But when you come up in the political world, you are trained to sit on one side of the aisle or the other. And the inability and unwillingness of most of my colleagues to simply reach their hand across that aisle, literally, is appalling. It is not that hard. You'd think it was to take some grand change or new legislation. No, it takes just a change in leadership that is inspired from morning to night. And I'm going to tell you a story before I leave that will illuminate how I do that. But that's how we get things done. And you would be amazed at how much common ground there is between liberals and conservatives on the biggest issues facing the country. Think about things. Climate change is real. My conservative colleagues know that. Many of them are actually trying to find solutions. Texas, one of the deepest red states in the country, is one of the most progressive clean energy states in the country. Gun violence, even those who live and die by the Second Amendment, passionate supporters and defenders, they don't want their kids killed in mass shootings in schools or nightclubs or grocery stores or theaters. We have differences of opinion on how to solve it. But there are issues like that. Small businesses, healthcare, housing, education. If we just started with the same objective, that's common ground, we could get somewhere. But politics teaches you to start with the tactics, which by definition divide. And that's why when we have a Congress filled with politicians instead of people with private sector experience, and people in the White House that have never, in the case of Joe Biden, ever had a life outside of the public sector, he doesn't have the mindset, let alone the abilities, to actually listen, learn, set an objective, bring people together, take off so that they're at the landing. It is actually not that hard, and all I'm asking for is 4 years to give this a try. Do it differently. I'll have a bipartisan cabinet of the best and brightest Americans, not politicians. People who can run multi-billion-dollar enterprises, who understand customer service and balance sheets and P&L statements and technology and management. Why would we put politicians in charge of multi-billion-dollar, multi-thousand employee enterprises? It's crazy. I will have a youth cabinet, a high school student or a college student from every one of the 50 states, red and blue, of all colors, races, religions, geographies, to share with their president what's on their mind as it relates to artificial intelligence, social media regulation, climate change, gun violence. These are the things we have to start doing. And it is not that hard. We just need a little bit of innovation and less condemnation. And mark my words, there will be a new day on January 21st, 2025, if we're willing to give it a chance.
Two more.
Two more.
Actually.
Yeah. Whenever he says two more, I say, okay, 3.
Proposed Medicare for all. I'm a retired oncologist after 47 years of practice. I've had experience working in private practice as an employee of a hospital and doing work with local tenants in multiple states, in multiple institutions and situations. So I'm very familiar with the pluses and minuses of Medicare. It actually works very well. It works very well for the physicians, for the practitioners, and now as a senior, it works very well for me. My question relates to how you would actually establish this Medicare, because Medicare Advantage is not what people believe it to be. When they said Obama was trying to take $715 million away from Medicare, what that was a pilot program that Congress voted for to see if private insurers and private health care could provide the service for less money. What it proved was that it actually cost more. And that's why they wanted to end that program, but it continues to the point where the majority of Medicare patients have Advantage. Been scandals about billions of dollars being taken from the government. And the way this now works is that the government is spending more money on these Advantage programs, and the patients are getting less for it. How would you establish the Medicare program that you're proposing?
Thank you, doctor. And let me tell you about my journey very quickly, and let me tell you about how I think we can achieve it. First of all, I grew up very fortunate. I took it for granted I had health coverage as a kid. I took it for granted when our businesses afforded it to me and all of our employees. And it didn't start really affecting me until my daughter Pia was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, and she spent time at Children's Hospital in Minneapolis. And when we were there, as a family, we noticed that in her hallway there were a number of kids, we were told, that had no health insurance, but they also had no visitors during the day. And it was sad. My daughter Pia was really affected by the fact that these kids were sitting alone in their rooms almost all day long. Why? Because their parents had to work hard and they couldn't get time off, and we had no paid leave. And it really changed our perspective on healthcare, the haves and the have-nots. Pia, my daughter, was so affected by it that she and a friend of hers that has diabetes started a group called Backpack. They took backpacks, stuffed them with cozy things and stuffed animals and game, and they distributed them to kids in children's hospitals all around the country. It really changed her, and it changed me. Then I became a board chair of Allina Health System in Minnesota, the biggest health system in the state. And I learned about the provision of care. And I got to see how much uncompensated care we were delivering, how many people came into the ED, the emergency department, because they had no coverage, which is the most expensive care. How many people lacked it? How many kids could not see the blackboard and were terrible students, and all they needed was a pair of glasses? So all these experiences really affected me. And then I run for Congress, and I am in a district that is home to United Health Group, the biggest health insurer in the world. They employ tens of thousands of my constituents. Let me tell you, talk about an ethical conflict of representing, my duty to represent the people and the businesses in my community, despite the fact that I think they are playing a role that is actually hurting this country, even though it's by the rules. They take $21 billion a year of net income off of the table from the system and return it to shareholders. All of those dollars can and should and must be used to cover the cost of care for people. So we have 26 million people that have no coverage right now at all, 90 million uninsured. Some of you in this very room might be one illness away from bankruptcy. Do you know that 2/3 of bankruptcies in this country are from medical debt? In the United States of America, do you know that we spend over $12,000 per capita per person in this country on healthcare? More than double any other nation in the world for the most part. Do you know our outcomes are mid-pack? Why would we allow pharmaceutical companies to sell their pharmaceutical products in our country for a penny more than they do to Canada, Mexico, Spain, Germany, Japan, Australia? Why? So my contention is this, and by the way, we don't have health care, we have sick care, as you well know. That means we only pay providers if people get sick for procedures. There is no incentive to keep people healthy. So in my model, we extend health care coverage to all, not have the government deliver care. I want that to be in the private sector, but the coverage of care would be a single national health insurance program. If you wish to amplify it with private dollars for concierge care, fine, more power to you. It's kind of analogous to public education. If you want to go to a public school, it's there for you. If you want private or parochial or charter or in school, you can do that too. But the notion is this, to change the model instead of fee for service to some type of a capitated model, where it gives people in the health providers the incentive to keep you healthy. So if you want to be part of this national program, you've got to get an annual checkup. right? And then you've got to listen to your doctors and actually maybe eat a little bit differently or get some exercise. And then the system has an incentive to keep you well, so they will spend money to keep you well. That's changing the incentive model. We will spend less, I believe, we will get better outcomes, and we will actually stimulate the economy and create more jobs, because with 26 million people now covered, there will be needs. And by the way, hospitals are closing left and right in rural America right now. We don't have health care for emotional and mental health. We don't have eye and ear, right? I mean, and dental. Let's all do it together. Let's be a country that actually invests in health care, not sick care. And I guarantee you, we will spend less money. It will stop consuming 18% of our GDP. I would love to hear from you if you have thoughts on how that can be done, but everybody I speak with who has Medicare says it works beautifully. I choose my provider, it's taken care of. I don't have to worry about access and bills. And I think we can do that better, and I think we can learn from our friends around the world, the ones that have done it well, the ones that have not done it well, to do it the best in the entire world. That's my proposition. And when I'm president, I will not let, if I have the power vested in me to find a way through legislation or executive order, there has got to be a way to stop the nonsensical policy of allowing pharmaceutical companies to charge us more than anyone in the world. Not just a little, 3, 4, 5, 10 times more. Why are we subsidizing the entire world when it comes to that? Why are we subsidizing the entire world's policing? When you really get down to it, we are making some terribly misguided decisions that are helping so many others and not helping this country. I'll close it with this. Joe Biden has invested in America. I voted for it, I helped market it, I believe in it. The CHIPS Act, the infrastructure bill, that's investments in America. When I'm president, we will start investing in Americans. That's healthcare, housing, education, and to make sure we start these American Dream accounts to fundamentally change outcomes for so many kids in this country. How about young Fleck?
One quick one,
Yeah.
last quick
How
one.
about you?
So what's your stance on like US military intervention and the current state of the defense budget? Because I didn't really see that on your website.
Yeah, so we spend just a little under $1 trillion a year on our military budget. The Pentagon has not passed an audit, and that they will when I'm president. We are now a country that has bases or facilities in 80 countries, and 700 of them total. We spend more on our military than about the next 8 countries combined. So I think 2 things can be true at once. We can and must be the most robust military in the world. We must invest in the most extraordinary 21st century technologies to keep us safe. Deterrence is a big deal, but I will make the case to you that I think we can spend less and do it with the right people and strategies. I'm sick of a military-industrial complex that tells Congress what we should be afraid of so we can buy their systems, many of which are archaic, unneeded anymore, that members of Congress want because it's pork barrel spending. But I think we are woefully misguided right now. And like I said, we have 500,000 people sleeping outside every night. I sit in Manchester and see veterans sleeping in Veterans Park. I know children are going to school hungry. I know children are taking on debt for, young people taking on debt for college. You know, I know that healthcare is unaffordable for so many. I know that food is too expensive. A bag of Doritos has doubled in price essentially in the last number of years, or at least 50% higher. And then fuel, home heating oil, you know, in the $4 range, almost 4.5 or so, in a part of the country where people rely on that for the winter and they're needing subsidies. I mean, why are we doing this? And why? I'll tell you why, and I'll close with this. It's very simple. I'll give you the case of the pharmaceutical industry. It's a little different than military, but it's the same way the military suppliers do this as well. The pharmaceutical industry spends about $300 million a year in Washington. They hire huge numbers of lobbyists, I'm told like more than 2 per member of Congress. They invest in every single congressional campaign, I think, in the entire Washington, other than mine, because I don't take it. And I hope you understand the difference here. I don't take their money. If you were a member of Congress and I'm the lobbyist for the pharma company, I could hand you a $5,000 check for your campaign, and then tomorrow, sitting in a chair like you are, you're sitting up here as a member of Congress, industry that they just paid you $5,000. And we think that's not legal, it's nonsense. That's how we change it. You know, you can't buy me. You can't influence me with your handout. And I just think we're facing a time now where we've got to just tell people the truth about what's really going on. The wealthy and the well-connected get the access, they get the votes, they get the ear time, they get the eye time, they get the face time. And most of this country's had enough. And the only person that finally said, I understand it, is Donald Trump. Well, let me tell you, I understand it too. And I mark my words, when I'm on the debate stage with that man, I will eviscerate him by invitation. And that, my friends, is how we're going to proceed. I'm going to tell you a quick story and we got to go. Can you make it real fast?
Very briefly, follows up on both the last two things you talked about. I heard you very movingly talk about your father realizing too many people were making money in the Vietnam War. They're doing it with Ukraine. You're doubling down on Biden. Why?
Doubling down on
we have
Biden?
no treaty obligations with Ukraine, and yet you're supporting continuing fighting in Ukraine. Why would you do that?
Well, here, let me tell, doubling down, you're talking about in supporting Ukraine. Okay,
Continue
well, here,
to
I'll tell you
spend
exactly why. Because I'm a student of history.
Go on.
I know, you all know what the exit from Vietnam was a debacle. We never should have been there. The exit from Afghanistan was a debacle. You could argue that we were there for way too long. What has happened in the meantime is the world is now looking at us very differently. They used to look at us as a country that if you messed with us, we would respond. And therefore they didn't mess with us and they didn't mess with the world. Look at now what North Korea is doing. Look at what Iran is doing as recently as yesterday. They are poking us and prodding us because they know the great United States of America, if you just outlast them, they'll give up. And if we give up on Ukraine right now, by the way, you are right in terms of it should not be only our responsibility. There's absolutely no question. It should be the responsibility of the European Union countries that have plenty of economic might to do so because it is their back door. There's no
We have
question.
no treaty obligations.
And we should be pursuing peace. And by the way, we should, just as we should be doing in the Middle East, we should be in pursuit of peace right now. As president, my entire mission is to lead with peace. If you violate the terms, believe me, we're going to be ready for you. But I have got to move this country in a direction that starts with peace. To your question, if we stop now, at this moment, and Vladimir Putin has all the cards, I'm telling you, it is in the worst interest of the United States of America. All of our adversaries will take note that we have lost that resolute nature of the United States. I'm saying in this case, we were actually right to support Ukraine, but I also believe Joe Biden could have stopped this. Back in 2014, when Putin took Crimea. If not, when Putin was massing his troops on the border and everybody knew what was about to start. I do not understand. I'm not saying with certainty I could have prevented it, but my goodness, I absolutely would have tried, and I'm appalled that we find ourselves in this position, particularly with so many Americans suffering. So I hear you. I'm just going to make the case to you that I think giving up is going to be very dangerous for their generation. Because, okay, we got it. I can't tell any story. Okay, real quick story. I'm going to tell you how I'm going to lead, okay? It's called Common Ground. How will I lead in the White House? I'm going to literally have these dinners that we do in Minnesota, lunches and dinners called Common Ground dinners. There is division in this country, but I'm on a mission to demonstrate that it's solvable. So we have these dinners, 6 Democrats and 6 Republicans sit at the table just like this, facilitated by an amazing group called Braver Angels. Any of you heard of them? Amazing. Please look into them. They're awesome. We talk about healthcare, we talk about immigration, and we talk about national division. And at the end of the gathering, 2 hours, we go around the table and everybody takes 30 seconds and explains what they got from this experience. So just recently we had an experience where a young woman named Emily looks across the table at Dave and says, Dave, when you drove up in your F-150 with the Trump sticker, I almost got back in my car, left the parking lot, and drove off. I could barely get myself to walk in the building, let alone sit at the table with you. And then she said, sheepishly, she said, you know, Dave, I got to tell you, I've never sat with a Trumper, and I really liked you. And I want to thank you for an experience that I won't forget. Goes around the table to Dave, he looks at Emily, and he says, Emily, when you drove up in your Prius, I wanted to run it over. And he said, but I'm glad I didn't because I've never sat with a progressive before and I had no idea how much ground we had. And at that moment, the dyed-in-the-wool Trumper and the bleeding heart liberal stood up in front of our table and they embraced, they hugged in front of us. And right then and there, I recognized no matter where this career goes, it's ended in Congress. If it continues another 4 years after this, or maybe 8, or comes to a close, time will tell. But that moment made me realize it was all worthwhile. And that's exactly how I'm going to lead in the White House. With Common Ground dinners in the White House, with everyday Americans, red and blue and purple and in between, coming to their White House, to their house, having dinner with their president in a casual setting so they can get to know each other and listen and be heard. Because it's possible with a little bit of space and place. So if you want to join this mission, and believe we can accomplish it together, be Dave and be Emily, and I love you all. Have an awesome day. Keep the faith and please, January 23rd.
Give it up to Team Phillips. All right, so here we go. He goes to the store, we have about 8